Hope everybody's doing well today. I want to welcome everybody to the Unimpressed podcast. We have a friend calling in from Vermont, and her name is Mirna Valerio. She has a very special story about running. Used to be a school teacher, and we're about to hear that story. So welcome, Mirna. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you for having me on your show.
And I don't know how to put this. I guess someone of your stature, you wouldn't expect them to be such an avid runner, which has created somewhat of a buzz for you. And tell me a little bit about what that drive is internally, and how often do you run, and what's the goal here?
So when you say stature, I am a plus-sized woman, and I've been plus-sized since I can remember, since second grade. And I've always loved movement. I didn't come from a family that did a whole lot of exercise because they had other priorities in Brooklyn, New York. That's where I grew up. But I had the opportunity to go to boarding school outside of New York City and try sports. And so my very first year at this boarding school, the master school in Dobbs Ferry, New York, I went up for the field hockey team. I was 13. This is 1989, which seems very long ago. And I had been so curious about the sport that I had seen on all my visits to boarding school. So I decided that this is the sport that I wanted to play. I'd looked at soccer. They looked like they were having an awful time running loops around the field. I didn't want to be inside. I definitely wanted to be outside. So I tried out for the field hockey team, and it was one of the toughest active days of my life. I get out there. We immediately run 5 loops of the field, which was just under a mile. You know, I didn't have any point of reference back then, but now I know that it was just under a mile. We're doing that to warm up. And then after that, we do a timed mile on the school's campus, which had a lot of hills. Another thing that was really, really very difficult for me, I came in penultimate in mouth guards and shin guards and doing things on the field. And we had to do dribbling with the ball and stuff. Remember, this is field hockey on grass. And it was really, really, really tough. And there was one instance where in the midst of this, one of our drills was to do line drills that used to be called suicide drills, where you go from 0 to 25, back to 0 to 50, and you're sprinting the entire time with no breaks. And this, again, very, very difficult for me, very challenging. I also had asthma. And so the coach runs up to me and says, and I think she's going to say, thank you, but no thanks. Why don't you go do community service or do something indoors? Because you're not going to be serving us very well on this field. But she came up to me and said, hey, how you doing? And I just had to shake my head because I couldn't speak. She goes, you know what? This is really hard. And I nodded. And she goes, you know what? You're out here. I know this is hard, but you're still doing it. You're still out here. So, keep it up. Great job. And then she runs to the next person. And that was it. That solidified my entry into sport forever. A lot of people don't have positive experiences like that, where they show up to somewhere and they don't really have any skills or they don't know what they're doing. She tells me I'm doing a great job, and I really want to do that great job. Right. And so the next morning after that practice, and after I got accepted onto the team, I started running. That was September of 1989. And except for a 3.5-year hiatus where my health just got progressively worse, back in 2004, I've been running ever since.
And how many times do you run during a week?
Well, during the week, let's see, nowadays, 3 to 4 times. I just came back from a ride, so I'm very big on cross training because I'm not injured anymore, though, knock on wood. So 3 to 4 times a week. I also have bike rides in there. I've got strength training. I work with a mobility coach. Sometimes I work with a lifting coach as well.
Being a plus size person, I guess when you think about that mentally, you wouldn't think you would be someone that runs 3 or 4 days a week. And you think it's a power of the mind and you can deliver what you want to deliver?
Yeah, I think, my body is very accustomed to doing long distances, and that's what I've trained it to do. But it also is definitely about mental power and mental grit, the ability to do things that are hard, and also to kind of shield yourself from what society's expectations of you are, so that you can get the work done for yourself. And that's how I live my life. People look at me, and I definitely, for a lot of people, don't look like a runner or a cyclist. Actually, today, before my run, I heard some people snickering when they looked at me because I was in my full kit. You know how cyclists can get with the colors and everything, tight clothes. But I was serious. I heard them snickering, and I knew they were laughing at me because I saw them and I established eye contact with them. But I was like, you know what? I got work to do. And I went on my ride. And so yeah, it definitely takes a lot of mental grit power, knowing that people are going to have their expectations or their opinions of me, but doing the thing anyway. And that's how I go about living my life.
Well, when you think about that, and you think about young people today, let's say if there's a plus size person today that's a little younger, and kids being highly sensitive, and the fact you had someone snickering today and you just went on about your business, which, I think you can applaud yourself for that, because a lot of people, I think, especially younger generation, they lay down to that. I mean, how would you inspire someone younger that could be a plus size and have the ability that you do, but may not do it because of the pressure of society?
Yeah, that's a great question. Exactly the way that I inspire people is by doing the thing and being very public about it. Doing it in the face of all of this criticism, all of the thoughts that people have, and doing it anyway. It's practiced. I think I'm also someone who has always been more interested in doing what I need to do for myself than pleasing other people. Being able to do stuff on your own is just like making sure that whatever you're doing for yourself, right? And if you have a solid knowledge of yourself, of what you're about, what your own purpose is, sure, it hurts when people criticize you. Sure, it hurts when people snicker at you. It absolutely does. And I'm not saying that those things don't have an effect on me or on people that are in the same sort of situation that I'm in. But practice just not getting over it necessarily, but practice moving past it and moving through it. People are going to laugh at you. Okay, they're going to laugh at you. Is it the right thing to do? No, but you're going to do the right thing by yourself.
And the power of the mind is a very big thing. And I have this thing about, the subconscious being programmed as we grow up, and then we start responding with our unconscious bias. And a lot of people, based on their programming, can't get to consciousness. First of all, because they don't understand the programming in your subconscious, and they don't understand how you're innately responding with your unconscious bias based on that programming. How did you keep a positive mindset? How did you ground yourself internally?
Well, in general, I come from a fairly supportive family, or a really supportive family. And I've always been pushed to be super curious to a lot of different things. And so that's how I go about everything, in terms of having confidence. And that confidence comes from, again, persistence. You have to practice putting yourself in situations that are scary, that are not what you typically do. And so that's how I've been able to face things, because it always stems from this curiosity. What could my body do? What could I do? What could I see? What new thing can I see? What new thing can I experience? That is how I'm able to go out and do the things that I do.
You said you're a school teacher for 18 years. And what went through your mind in the classroom with the change of kids and so forth, and what they deal with and who you are? What was your thought process dealing with kids in the classroom?
First of all, I love teenagers, love their budding adulthood. I love their snark. I have a 20-year-old. He just turned 20 last week. And I just love the age. There's this curiosity. There's this pushing back. There's this needing to grow. And that's something that really gels with me. And seeing them grow from a ninth grader to a senior in high school, seeing them really pursue their passions, their interests, seeing them really try to separate themselves from their parents, not in a bad way, but like become their own people. That's really priceless. And I love that about being in a classroom. And I love the conversations that I was able to have with my students. I love their excitement. I love to see them learning more and more about themselves and acting upon that. I love that. And so I was a cross country coach, having some of those students on my cross country team, and then seeing that other part of them. I taught at boarding school, so I would see them in a dorm as well. We would eat meals together. That was really cool. I got to know these teenagers holistically. And not every teacher has that opportunity to do that. I went to boarding school, and so my teachers were like that too. I was on their team. I was in the theater. I was in their dorm. And so they saw me as a holistic person. And I don't think a lot of teenagers have that opportunity to be seen as whole people. People have a very negative attitude towards teenagers. Sometimes for good reason.
Hmm.
But most of the time it's because they don't know them, and they don't know how teenagers are supposed to be developmentally, and how they are supposed to act. And that attitude that's coming from them is very often a brain thing. It's coming from their brain because they are trying to grow up. And so yeah, I love it. I loved being a teacher. Any chance that I have to go back and be with students. I was at a high school last week, and that was really fun. And I get to be with students again next week. I love their energy. It feeds me. And it just allows me to be a better person.
That's such a positive upside. And I can tell you're a very positive person, which you don't see a lot of, because I think a lot of negativity is perpetuated to some extent in society. I mean, did you ever have a situation where, a kid may have an issue or whatever, and you're thinking to yourself, based on where you've been and what you do and what your thought process is, did you ever think like they don't have that big of an issue?
Of course. Because sometimes their issues are very small, but I know that they seem very big to them, that those issues are very real to them. And that eventually, with some space and with some time, they will know that it wasn't the end of the world. Like having, for example, ending a friendship or ending some sort of relationship would be good for them in the long run. In the grand scheme of things, it wasn't that important. But the way their brains work, small things may seem really, really big to them. So I would always acknowledge that, hey, I know this hurts. I get it. Let's try to pack this away. Let's try to move on with our day. And again, I acknowledge that this hurts. I'm so sorry that this person hurt you. But you're stronger than this. You are going to get through this. It might hurt tomorrow. It might hurt the day after, but we're going to get through it. Okay. And so this way you honor their feelings, you honor what they're going through with the knowledge that they will probably get over it, or they will move through it. I don't like to say get over it, because some people can't get over things. It's depending on what their constitution is. But I love the idea of supporting them where they are. Like, I love the idea of somebody supporting me where I am. Even if something that I'm going through isn't a very big deal, or it doesn't seem like a very big deal to another person, but if they acknowledge me, they acknowledge what I'm going through, it makes it easier for me to have some perspective and move on. Right. And I wish that for every kid.
Well, and listen to that answer. Let's talk about mom and dad. It sounds like the lineage is very strong. How was mom and dad? What was mom and dad? What did they do to produce Mirna?
So I grew up with my mom and my stepfather, two very strong parents in Brooklyn, New York. We were we lived like right on, sometimes below the poverty line, sometimes above the poverty line into working class. But we had a very tight knit family. We lived in a building with a lot of our family, and so we were together all the time. We have a very strong, very populous family with a bunch of cousins and stuff like that. And so we grew up in this, I want to say, gorgeous family unit where I was definitely pinged to be the smart one very early on. And so they did whatever they could to support all of my interest and my curiosity. When I got into a gifted program, everything they could do, if they needed to buy me books, if I needed to be in school after school or before school, if I needed to join this club or that club, they were there for it. They made it happen. And sometimes it was very hard for them. But somehow all of that stuff got done. There were some times I wanted to take clarinet lessons and they couldn't. I still remember the moment where they said, "We're sorry, we can't afford to give you clarinet lessons." And I was really sad, but I did so many other things that, I got so much enjoyment out of. I got so much enrichment out of. So they, until this day, they are supportive. They, hey, what do you need? Are you taking care of yourself? That sort of thing. So we're very communicative, very, as I said, close knit, very positive family. We like to have fun. We like to laugh. And if there's drama in the family, we end up laughing about it.
So what part of Brooklyn was that?
Bushwick, and they are still there. They're still in Bushwick.
Bushwick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know Vicious Vivian Harris?
I don't. Who is Vicious Vivian Harris?
Vicious Vivian Harris. I don't know if he was exactly in Bushwick. What's the other kind of...
Bed-Stuy, Bushwick, Flatbush.
I think he was in Bed-Stuy.
Mm-hmm. Which is
Yeah,
right next to Bushwick.
yeah, well, when you go down the hill, as soon as you make the head down to Bed-Stuy, I think it's like a straight. There's like a couple restaurants. There's one chicken place at the top of the hill. You go down the hill, you make a right in the back, and make a right in the back.
So many chicken places. What are you talking about?
I mean, believe it or not, I've been there. I went there a couple times with Vivian. Vivian was a world champion. He was a boxer, Vicious Vivian Harris.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
I think he would be about your age in that range. I think he was a pretty big deal at one time in that area. The other side of that, before you get pushed there, that's the whole Jewish community on the
right.
front
So
side,
there's Williamsburg, right, and that's where my sister lives in Williamsburg, and that's where the Hasidim are, and then on the other side, literally on the other side of the tracks, there's Bushwick, and then if you go, I think it's further. If you go further east, it's Bed-Stuy, right? So
nice.
That's where I grew up.
Nice. Well, I'm the redneck. I lived in North Caldwell, New Jersey, for 12 and a half years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where my dad was from. And my mom was from North Carolina. So
what
my
part
dad,
of North Carolina?
Asheville.
I used to live in North Georgia. We played all the schools. We were in the North Carolina League, actually. We were in our school in North Georgia. We were in the North Carolina League, and we would play all the schools up there and cross country and all that.
If you've experienced both worlds, here's kind of something that, I don't know why we live on these stereotypes, talking about stereotypes. And, I was in the South, had a funny accent. I'd go up and see my grandparent, my grandfather, and my dad, my dad's family brought the whole family from Newark on Titchener Street over to North Caldwell. And my family actually built North Caldwell in 1951. They brought the whole family, built their Italian community right there, had the cookie shop and all that kind of stuff. But, what I realized in life, and people create these stereotypes between the North and the South. What I realized that people don't look at environment and understand what environment does to people's lives compared, and it's just never been a thought process. And what I realized is everybody has the same sensibilities. I think it's just the environment that you experience that create these other nuances. Did you ever, when you first went south, did you ever think that and said, hey, these people thought process might be a little slow, but this is what they're experiencing down here? Well,
that's a good question. And that, I could take 3 hours to answer that. Born and raised in New York City. I went to rural South. I was in the mountains. I lived in rural Jersey too. I was in at the very north end of Somerset County, right into Hunterdon County. I taught at a school there. We were in between two farms. Had a lot of experience living in the country. I definitely went down south with a lot of stereotypes in my head. And, some of them turned out to be anecdotally true. I knew there were going to be accents. And there's a very, very particular North Georgia accent that I cannot replicate anymore because I don't live down there anymore. But, I was afraid. I was afraid of people looking at me as a Black woman and maybe being afraid or maybe making some assumptions about me, which lots of people did. But you do that everywhere, right? People make assumptions about, I live in Vermont. Vermont is the third whitest state in the union. I think it's the second or third or fourth, but it's up there, and then I know that people definitely look at me and have a snap judgment. That's what humans do. We have snap judgments about people based on our socialization. Like that's what you're talking about, your environment based on our socializations and how people deal with various things, right? And that's baked into how we live. And so the way I would see something, the way my perspective would be, wouldn't necessarily be the way somebody else's perspective would be because they've had differing lived experiences. Shocked by how seemingly casual everything was and how, being from New York and having, taught in Northeast schools and, in Maryland, everything moves by quickly. And I tend to be very blunt and I say exactly what's on my mind, where that wasn't how folks were down there. Very often got some feedback that, hey, maybe you should actually say hi to people first before you go people a greeting, before you go in on them or say what you need to say, and it was just a different way of being. I wasn't trying to be rude. They weren't trying to be rude to me, but, in that we clashed, but we had to understand each other. So that's where communication comes in and openness on every side. You have to be open. You have to be communicative. You have to realize that people have differing perspectives. They have differing lived experiences. And so, and they need to know that about you. And so so that was tough. I was down there for 5 years. My son was there for 6 years. He was in the boarding school there. I was the director of equity and inclusion, so I did a lot of training of students and of teachers, some community members, and being better communicators of our cultures, right? And so it's a cool thing when everybody realizes that that they have a particular socialization, and that is not the truth for everyone. Like their truth is not the truth for everybody. So it's I think it's really cool. So I definitely experienced that. Yeah, everywhere is going to be different, and I think you have to be patient with yourself. You have to be patient with other people. If you are open and willing to have conversations, that's the way to go.
Well, the reason I say that, I mean, I reverse engineer everything. I think stereotypes creates a lot of problems. I think the problem today when you talk about stereotypes and whatever level it is, you can't take an absolute narrative and hit somebody over the head with it. You know what I mean? Because
Yep.
you can't fault what someone's experiences have been. But I think if we looked at things as, all right, let's understand where this percentage started, whatever the narrative may be. Let's look at where this started and let's walk through this,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in a way, I think when things are defined, it's almost like putting an absolute on something. And when you put an absolute on something, it doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you say you're a vegan. People who are vegan, they're going to exhaust that vegan narrative to the cows come home. I think more people should experience different environments to really understand what life is about in a way.
Scary for them to experience different environments that they're not used to. It's really, because it might shake your world up.
People, I mean, they double down on narratives just to keep things the way they are.
Absolutely. People absolutely everywhere will double down on whatever kind of narrative or whatever kind of stereotype that they're holding close to their heart. Because number one, it might be the only thing that they know. Number two, maybe they haven't had experience with another type of person or situation, and it's scary to go beyond that because you're gonna have a reaction that maybe you've never had before. You're gonna have an experience that you've never had before, and that is scary to the human brain. We like to feel safe, right? So yeah, I absolutely think that people hold on to narratives because lack of experience and also because of fear.
In some of these things you may be experienced, is there anything you could elaborate on yourself that it could either helped you or caused an issue or something you overcame?
Anything that I do in sports, right? Coming back to sports, I started riding bikes because I was injured. I had torn meniscus, and then I had surgery to repair it, and so I couldn't run for about 8 to 10 weeks. And suddenly, my coach told me to get a bike. I got a bike. I was very reluctant. I didn't want to do it. Back then I had a lot of stereotypical thinking about the bike community, the cyclist community, in particular, the road cycling community. I was like, oh, those people are jerks. I don't want to be part of that community. I'm not mean. But I had to ride a bike. And so I got a bike, rode my bike, and then suddenly I get a bike sponsor. And I'm like, oh, wow, I have a bike sponsor. Suddenly they want me to learn how to mountain bike. And I'm like, they sent me a mountain bike. And I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? They're like, well, you got to ride it. I was like, I am not a mountain biker. I'm not trying to kill myself. Yeah. Very often I jump into things that, I'm unsure of, or that I jump into things with fear. But I had a lot of fear about mountain biking because it just looks dangerous. And it is dangerous. You think about it. And so what I did was I hired somebody to teach me how to mountain bike because I didn't know the first thing about it. And I went into it really scared. And that's another thing that I do is like, I have this fear on my shoulder, right? And I do the thing anyway because you just have to live with the fear. And hopefully, as you do the thing more and more, as you practice, you gain more confidence, you gain more skills. And I think you gain skills before you gain confidence, right? Once you have a skill, there's still skills that I have, but I'm not very confident about them. I was just talking to someone earlier today about this, about mountain biking in particular. And, of course, in my quest to learn mountain biking, I have gone over the bars several times. Wow. And that is scary. It's so scary. But each time I've been able to pop up right from going over the bars, because everybody goes over the bars. It looks more scary than it is unless you're going over a cliff. I'm not trying to go over a cliff, but it is practice. It is, if you need to hire somebody, if you need to talk to somebody, if you need to do a little bit more learning before you go out and do the thing, that's what you do. But it takes effort, right? It takes willingness to step into that unknown. And that's, man, there have been so many things. There's one thing that I will not do though, that I'm scared of, and it's jumping off a cliff, jumping off a cliff into water.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this today. I'm like, there's one thing that scares me so much that I won't do. Somebody's going to have me do it though. Like I'm going to be at a shoot or something like that I have to do. And I'm just going to have to do it. I'm just going to have to let go and try not to control the situation and just jump. Right. So I swim. I'm a good swimmer and I love heights, but, so like I think that's a great metaphor. Like once you at some point, you're going to get yourself into a situation where you just have to, right. And you cannot control it, but you utilize the skills that you already have as a human being to get through it and learn something new about yourself and maybe about somebody else.
Well, fear is fake unless you get hurt.
Well, I mean, if you get hurt, you get hurt.
Yeah,
the human body, but you don't want to put yourself into a situation, a physical situation where you don't have any skills or that's too dangerous. But like if we're talking about emotional hurt and maybe ego hurt, I've experienced that too. Those things, it's part of being a human being.
Yeah.
Right. Our egos get hurt. We get hurt emotionally. We get hurt mentally. Right. But the body is so wonderful. The brain is so wonderful that once we get hurt, we start working on healing. Right. And we've got to let ourselves heal. So we can't walk around afraid of getting hurt. We can't, unless maybe you have a weak immune system, unless there's something physically the matter. Right. But worrying about, I might trip. Mm-hmm. I get a lot of people, I don't know how you run trails. Like I would break my ankle. But you know what? The more you run trails, the less you break your ankle. But your ankle gets stronger. All those muscles around there get stronger. Well, you might twist your ankle. You might sprain yourself. But the body is so incredible that it will heal itself and make you stronger so you can go out again. And so I think that's a mindset that I often have to remember for myself. This is scary. I might fall. I might trip. But I got to get up and continue.
Emotions is the biggest juggernaut of the universe. If you eliminate emotions, right, and you take environment and you take 10 types of people that bring some type of lineage to the table and you leave emotion out of it, you can determine based on the traits of the lineage and based on the environment, you could predict what those 10 types of people would do. And that's stuff I think about because I have some quantum physics coming through. I'm a clairsentient, and my family was Native American, Cherokee Indian. And, I think if people can maybe isolate things sometimes and understand things like that, I guess it's pragmatic. I don't know how you would say that. I think people can identify things a little better, I think. So within saying that, what is your approach to your narrative moving forward? What is your goal with your narrative? I know you said you do some speaking engagements, you talk to some people, you have a very positive mindset. What is your goal for humanity?
My goal for humanity, number one, I would love people not to be jerks to each other. Number two, I want people to feel empowered to do the things that they need to do for themselves and for their communities. I want you to do things for yourself and for your community, for your family. Do the things that you need to do. Acknowledge that there are people out there that, have these expectations and perceptions of you, but what really matters is what you do for yourself and what you do for your community.
Let me just interject this. If you started with kids, I think a lot of people with what you just said, I think can be done. I think a lot of people are already down the road, but systematically, I think our system is somewhat sets people up for failure. I'll explain why. And it keeps people hollow to some extent. Because when you're starting school, first of all, kids till 5 years old have the greatest imagination you could ever think you could have, right? They get into school, they lose that imagination.
We beat it out of them.
It's a grade system. And I can see this linearly in society where it plays out in a job someone took that they weren't happy taking, and 20 years later they're miserable. I think if we can start with someone that is a positive mindset like yourself, create that positive mindset, because I think kids, when they're in school, they're trying to hit this grade. They're trying to hit a number, and that's all they go for. They're trying to hit that number. And when they do enough to hit that number, and they don't relish anything, they don't, internalize anything that they can carry with them through life and give them more of a foundation. They give that foundation away early in life. And when you give your foundation away early in life, I think by default, we have this negativity that you speak about, where people are nasty to people and negative to people, So I think if people didn't give away their foundation at an early age, and we could start with a positive mindset like yourself at an early age, I think society would be a lot different.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I think we need to be in the practice of empowering kids, empowering their, as you said, their imaginations, their curiosity, their zest for life. You know how we stop kids? We stop them from running, right? We're like, oh, don't run. Because, they're out there, they're just having the time of their lives, and like, oh, stop running. Just, I noticed this in the city, in New York anyway, like, stop running, just stop, but what is the reason, right? Because we can't control them. Right? Yeah. We're so bent on controlling people and kind of sort of controlling how they learn, and controlling, not necessarily what they think, but just like how they learn and what those outcomes are supposed to be. And thank goodness, like I never worked in a school like that. We encouraged kids to like explore, imagine, create. Like we stop them from creating the things that they want to create, because you've got to create this, as you said, for this particular rubric or grade or what have you. And then we get sucked into these boxes. And it's very hard to be expansive when we're in those boxes. And so I would say for kids at middle school age, not just the really young ones, but middle school age, high school, they're so disinterested because we have squashed their imaginations, right? We are not paying attention to the fact that they need to sleep more. And what does sleep do? Sleep allows you to imagine. It allows your brain and your body to recover. And they're not sleeping enough. I could go on for 3 more hours. I won't. But all of these little things add up to this, like a sort of very disengaged humanity, right? Yeah. And when we're disengaged, we don't care. This is not everyone, hashtag not all people, right? But this is not everyone, but there definitely is a trend of disengagement, disillusionment, disinterest, and just kind of accepting life as it is.
People need to be accountable for themselves,
but we also need to be accountable to kids. We need to be accountable to children, to kids, because they are, as Whitney Houston said, I believe the children are the future, because they literally are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's the subconscious thing. Have you ever heard that before?
Which subconscious thing?
Subconscious. Well,
just in general. Subconscious in general?
When I looked at science is a one-lane highway. So when you look at subconscious, it's identified one way. You look at unconscious bias, it's identified one way. You look at consciousness, it's identified one way. And I mean, you're exactly right. We can redesign this world, and we can redesign humanity if we start with the kids. And if you realize that, obviously you bring a lineage to the table, with what are attributes they are, traits they are. And then the environment has an effect on those traits or attributes, whatever they are. But those experiences and the way the mind is I guess formed, if you will, by information, and however that information comes into a young person, that's your subconscious. Like I said, it's being programmed. And when we get to a certain point in life, we start responding to things based on that programming with our unconscious bias. And a lot of people don't realize that, and they don't realize how to fix that if they have a lot of vibration around that subconscious that is really hard to dig into. And that's why I think we have a hard time getting to consciousness, because every human being is supposed to be able to get to consciousness. But I think in some ways, structurally, things are set up it holds us from getting to consciousness. And I think if more people understood that and start with the kids, we could definitely reset a lot of things.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I don't know if you want to touch on anything else. We've had a great conversation. Was there anything else Mirna wants to put out to the world?
Joy. Just, be in joy. accept joy into your lives, embrace it and live it. That's what I got to say.
Well, if you're a plus size person and you need inspiration, I think Mirna Valerio is a great person to go to or look for. A very positive person. You should definitely do some type of inspirational series or something, because I think a lot of people could really benefit on what you have to say.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah. I do have a course. It's a workshop. It's a workshop, not a course. It's a workshop that I do called Manifesting Joy. And at the end of it, we create a joy manifesto. It's really corny, but I'm all about the corn. I'm all about bringing it together, being corny together, but also like being joyful in a group of other human beings. I think that's really important for us.
Well, this has been Mirna Valerio, and I'm John Edmonds Cosma, the CEO of Bang Productions.